turbocharged 51 over here. I hope you're having a splendid day wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to the Motorsport Lounge for another podcast. And sorry this one has been taking a while to get to you guys. I obviously know this one as well as the Saudi one has taken a while. But guys, like I've been saying the past few months on the channel, it's been a hectic time for me recently. And also, guys, excuse my voice. I am currently a bit sick. I've got a little bit of a cold, so I'm going to be drinking a lot of water throughout this podcast, and you're going to hear a lot of this. Before I go any further, you guys heard in the previous podcast that Craig would have joined me for today's podcast, but guys, he's unfortunately extremely busy with university work. Obviously, I'm in South Africa, he's in England. Things work a lot different over there than over here. So for us to get a time to match just wasn't possible, and I obviously had to get this out before the 2022 season started, and we are so close. So yeah, this is going to be my personal opinion, but I've taken into account the Motorsport Lounge members' opinions as well as Craig's opinion, because today we are talking about the very controversial end to the best Formula One season in more than 2 decades, the season finale, the 2021 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Now, first of all, let's jump straight into the race results. So, guys, sorry about that. I'll try to do that as minimal as possible, but yeah, like I said, sick, not the point. Your race winner and new Formula One world champion was Max Verstappen for Red Bull Racing. He won the race in 1 hour 30 minutes 17.345 seconds, banking the full 26 points. Lewis Hamilton for Mercedes was in second, 2.2 seconds behind Max. Carlos Sainz got P3 for Ferrari, 5 seconds behind Max. Yuki Tsunoda got P4 for AlphaTauri, followed by his teammate Pierre Gasly Tsunoda got P4 for AlphaTauri, followed by his teammate Gasly in P5, also for AlphaTauri. Bottas got P6 for Mercedes, with Norris P7 for McLaren, Alonso P8 for Alpine. Esteban Ocon was 9th in the second Alpine, with Charles Leclerc in 10th in the second Ferrari. That is your top 10 finishes of the points. Furthermore, it was Sebastian Vettel in P11 for Aston Martin. Then Ricciardo finished in P12 for McLaren, with Lance Stroll P13 for Aston Martin. Mick Schumacher was the final finisher for Haas in P14. Your retirements were Sergio Perez for Red Bull, Nicholas Latifi for Williams, Giovinazzi for Alfa Romeo, George Russell for Williams, and also for his final race in Formula One, Kimi Raikkonen was your first retirement for Alfa Romeo. And the one driver who didn't start the Grand Prix, thanks to being diagnosed with COVID-19, was Nikita Mazepin. Hopefully Mazepin has a quick recovery. Obviously by this time he has recovered now, but in the moment I thought it would have been a nice gesture, so he didn't even start the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Now, the final results for the Constructors' Championship. Haas Ferrari finished in P10 on 0 points for the season. Alfa Romeo Ferrari were in P9 on 13 points. Williams Mercedes ended up in P8 on 23 points. Aston Martin Mercedes finished up in P7 on 77 points. AlphaTauri Honda came in P6 on 142 points. Alpine Renault achieved P5 on 155 points, with McLaren Mercedes in P4 on 275 points. The guys in red, Scuderia Ferrari, came in P3 on 323.5 points. Red Bull Racing Honda was in P2 on 585.5 points. And for the 8th time in a row, Mercedes AMG Petronas Racing won the Constructors' Championship on 613.5 points. Congratulations, Mercedes. 8 Constructors' Championships in a row. Now, the final results for the Drivers' Championship was Nikita Mazepin ended in P20 on 0 points, Mick Schumacher 19th on 0 points, Antonio Giovinazzi in P18 on 3 points, Nicholas Latifi in P17 on 7 points, Kimi Raikkonen in P16 on 10 points, with George Russell in P15 on 16 points, Yuki Tsunoda got P14 on 32 points, Lance Stroll P13 on 34 points, with Sebastian Vettel in P12 on 43 points, Esteban Ocon came in P11 on 66 points, and breaking into the top top 10, you've got Fernando Alonso in P10 on 81 points. He was behind Pierre Gasly in P9 on 110 points, only 5 points behind Daniel Ricciardo in P8 on 115. Charles Leclerc came in P7 on 159 points, just 1 point behind Lando Norris in P6 on 160. Carlos Sainz was best of the rest in P5 on 164.5 points. Sergio Perez came in P4 on 190 points. Valtteri Bottas P3 on 226 points, with Lewis Hamilton in P2 on 387.5 points, and just losing out to Max Verstappen by 8 points on 395.5 points. Now guys, let's jump straight into the talking points, because obviously after you guys listened to my Brazilian Grand Prix podcast, as well as obviously before this the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix podcast, it was quite clear that all my bets were in the Mercedes and Hamilton camp, because in the final 6 races of the season, Verstappen had the tendency to drive very dirty. But the first thing that I already mentioned when I went through the results for the race was just my best wishes towards Nikita Mazepin for being diagnosed, for being tested positive for COVID-19. We know he recovered well, but in the moment, my best wishes were with Nikita. So I'm glad that is all sorted. Now, let's talk about the start. What a fantastic start from Hamilton. Out launching Verstappen, who was on softs, and Hamilton on the mediums. And guys, I talked about this in a few podcasts ago. The Mercedes just had that car's launch completely linked up with the medium tires. This season, no car has been better off the line on the mediums than the Mercedes, and I will stand by that. Verstappen had the grippier tire and was on the cleaner side of the track, and yet he still got out-launched by Hamilton. That speaks volumes. And heading into the first corner, Hamilton was a full car length ahead. There was nowhere for Max to go. He had to slot in behind Lewis. So it was a fantastic, fantastic start from the 7-time world champion. And it just shows how much Mercedes have worked on this car this season, even though they didn't do as much as Red Bull. But if you look at the amount of work that Mercedes did compared to Red Bull, and at the end of the season they had the quicker car, it shows you just how deeply engraved Mercedes are in actually getting, it's only tiny mistakes that cost them pace. As soon as they sort out those tiny mistakes, they still have the fastest car. Red Bull had the fastest car at the season, but as soon as Mercedes sorted out their tiny mishaps, they were once again the fastest car, and Red Bull struggled to stick with them in race pace. Quali pace, the Red Bull was there. Race pace, they really struggled to stick with the Merc. But so it just shows Mercedes always build an overall competitive good package. It's just when there's tiny problems around the car, they need to figure the tiny problems out, because the main foundation of the car is built to be fast, and that is something that Mercedes has done better than any team in the V6 turbo hybrid era. And even me as a Ferrari fan, I will admit that nobody has held a candle to Mercedes when it comes to that. But heading on to the next topic, that 3-wide moment between Norris and the 2 Ferraris were epic, guys. The amount of absolutely insane racing we've gotten this year from the midfield, but specifically between McLaren and Ferrari, have been exceptional. Now, obviously, we all would have loved if that was also part of the championship battle. Not that I'm downgrading the championship battle at all, because the Hamilton, Verstappen, and Red Bull v Mercedes fight has been something it's literally been something that has been edged into the history books. And then you had this midfield. You had Aston Martin, AlphaTauri, and Alpine scrapping away, and then McLaren and Ferrari for best of the rest. And the midfield this season, you even had George Russell mixing it in there with his Williams now and again. It made the midfield so action-packed, and moments like this, which I'm talking about now, the 3-wide moment between Norris and the 2 Ferraris, was absolutely insane. It was on the back straight heading into the middle sector chicane. And just McLaren and Ferrari this year, except for Mercedes and Red Bull, have given us some of the best racing of the season. Close call, but fair hard wheel-to-wheel racing, and it has been phenomenal. So there's not really much to say more about that, but just that 3-wide moment between Norris and the two Ferraris was an exceptional piece of racing to see. Now, let's talk about the first mistake. Well, the first incident of this entire race. So obviously Hamilton got the launch off of the line on this backstraight where the Ferraris and Norris had their 3-wide moments. Ahead of them, Verstappen went for an almighty dive bomb on Hamilton, forced Hamilton off the track. And as soon as Hamilton was forced to cut the corner, the first thing that Red Bull threw in Mercedes' face, and a lot of the Red Bull and Verstappen fans was, oh, Hamilton cut the track to gain an advantage. Now, to all the Red Bull fans, let me just quickly put it this way. Crofty immediately backed Hamilton and said there was nothing that Lewis could have done. Verstappen literally went for such an insane dive bomb, Hamilton would have had to hop over the sausage curb to try and make the corner, and that would have broken his car. If you're fighting for a championship, you can't afford that. Any of us, if we were in Hamilton's shoes, would have done exactly the same thing. Now, my opinion on this is that Verstappen went for a dive that wasn't on, first of all, because he barely made the corner himself. He barely didn't make, well, like, he almost didn't make the corner. And it's just, Lewis had nowhere to go, and I completely back the stewards on this decision. But this decision is the only decision that I support of this entire race weekend. Literally, the bullet point that I wrote was this one situation of the entire race that I agree with the stewards on was the no investigation needed for this incident, and I completely agree with that. Verstappen went for a lunge that wasn't on, nearly didn't make the corner himself. He literally only kept his two left tires within the track limits. Where the hell is Hamilton supposed to go? If Verstappen's, remember, Hamilton is on his right side. If Verstappen's left side of the car, the only part of the car that's touching the physical part of the track that is not exceeding track limits, are his two left-hand wheels, where's Hamilton supposed to go? You tell me. So that decision I completely agreed on with the stewards. But now that we head into the more depth Verstappen-Hamilton fight, Mercedes' Achilles heel this weekend was one of two things. Well, it was actually both things, to be deadly honest. First, Bottas not being able to support Hamilton like Perez supported Verstappen. And second, Mercedes being forced to defend Hamilton's lead over Verstappen, being unable to gamble on tyre strategy like Red Bull. And this all comes down back to the Bottas thing. We all know Bottas didn't qualify the best, and also Valtteri just had a very mediocre race. So Valtteri wasn't there to help Hamilton at all. So Hamilton was constantly fighting with both Red Bulls, and that is basically, to me, what was the reason for Hamilton losing this championship. If Bottas was there to put pressure on Red Bull, and specifically Perez, we wouldn't have had the situation that we did. And that moves me into my next topic, because Perez's defending from Hamilton was exceptional. Even though he held up Hamilton, it was still brilliant. If Valtteri was there to have supported Hamilton, Red Bull would have not been able to put Perez in the position that they did to basically hold Hamilton up, and in the space of 2 laps enable Max to close a gap of, I think it was something between 6 to 8 seconds, but he closed it down to within half a second within a lap. That is how badly Perez held up Hamilton. And yes, once again, I'm not saying Perez is a dirty driver or anything in this remark. I actually do feel Lewis's team radio that said this is dangerous driving was completely pathetic, because he did the exact same thing to Rosberg in 2016. But so that was brilliant racing from Sergio Perez. Mr. Tire Management himself, and he did what Red Bull needed him to do. And honestly, except for the safety car at the end, that defending from Hamilton is what won Verstappen the championship. Verstappen didn't win the championship thanks to his own acting. Obviously, he made the move on the final lap, which we'll get to. But if it wasn't for this, Hamilton would have been in a dominant position where he would have been able to pit, because if Verstappen lost those 6 to 8 seconds, if Verstappen didn't gain those 6 to 8 seconds, Hamilton would just have extended his gap to when the safety car did eventually hit. Hamilton would have been able to pit and come out on fresh softs, and he would have had the upper hand. But because of what Perez did, Mercedes and Hamilton had to stick to their hard tires for the rest of that race. Perez managed to give Red Bull the upper hand if there was a safety car, which there was, and we saw how that panned out. So, once again, nothing against Perez. Beautiful, clean, exceptional defending, how racing is supposed to be done, because there wasn't a little bit of contact between Hamilton or Perez. So, beautiful racing from the Mexican. Now, Hamilton's radio message was a bit laughable, in my opinion, Rosberg 2016. I already mentioned this, guys. The fact that he called Perez's driving dangerous was just like, seriously, Lewis? Seriously, you did the exact same thing to Rosberg in 2016 because you tried to win the championship as well. So, now, guys, I say again, because every time I do a podcast like this, you guys think I'm a Hamilton fanboy. I'm not. I don't like Hamilton or Verstappen. I just have more respect for Hamilton than I have for Verstappen. I'm not saying Verstappen is a bad driver, or he's not deserving of his seat, or he's not a good driver. Not at all. Both of them have got ego problems, in my opinion. Verstappen a lot worse than Hamilton. Hamilton had the same issue as Verstappen ever since he joined Mercedes in 2013 till about 2018. And from 2019, Hamilton really started, I almost want to say he started to grow up. I know it's a very childish term to use. It's not that I'm saying Hamilton was childish. It's just that's the only thing that I could think of off the top of my head. So I'm not saying Hamilton was childish, but Hamilton had the same attitude that Verstappen has now. And I can't stand an egotistical person. I can't. So, I'm not a Hamilton fan, I'm not a Verstappen fan, I'm not a Hamilton hater nor a Verstappen hater, but I respect Hamilton more than Verstappen. And due to Verstappen's actions in the last third of the season, I would have wanted Lewis to win the championship more, because I feel he was more deserving. But I'll get to the more deserving part a little bit later on. So, Leclerc's T3 yeet was hilarious. Now, guys, if you guys remember this, Verstappen, when the first sequence of pit stops happened, Verstappen came out of the pit lane and he came out ahead of Leclerc. And for some other reason, Leclerc got so distracted by Verstappen's Red Bull leaving the pit lane, or it was just a complete wash of dirty air. But Leclerc just yeeted the car off at turn 3. The car just went straight. And it was actually very comical, because it just like you see, okay, here comes the camera angle, is showing Verstappen coming out of the pit lane. It cuts to that camera angle at the hairpin before we get onto the straight, and you just see, yeet, there goes the Ferrari. And I'm like, nice, Charles, nice. We already won against McLaren, but still, nice. There's a chance for a podium here, and you just go and yeet it into oblivion. It was very comical. I thought that was hilarious. But then, after all this, the race got a bit lackluster until the final 5 laps. Now, guys, what I mean by this is, we all know Abu Dhabi, I don't know, sorry, I'm going to go with Abu Dhabi because Abu Dhabi sounds stupid. This track is always going to stay, a very hard to race on track. And after the first sequence of pit stops, after everybody was done with their first stint and everybody got on to their second stint, like I said, the race became a bit lackluster. And it was just, nothing happened until Latifi, obviously had his crash and caused the safety car. And then that's when I obviously went into panic, because I thought Lewis has got this, he's got the championship. And then Latifi goes and yeets it into the wall. But, that's all I wanted to say really for this point is, Abu Dhabi doesn't lend itself to good racing for a complete Grand Prix like we saw at Baku, like we saw at Saudi. And Saudi shouldn't have been, but there was constant overtaking, constant battling. And other tracks like, even Hungary. Hungary lent itself to better racing than Abu Dhabi and it's got so much more straights, Abu Dhabi. But it's just, Abu Dhabi is not one of my favorite tracks, and I don't think it ever will be unless the track gets completely remodeled. It's not a track that really, sits fond in my heart, let me put it that way. Now, safety car caused by Latifi's crash. Now, what I want to mention here is the steward's absolute patheticness came out in these final 5 laps. And the right decision, in my opinion, was made first. No cars to unlap the safety car. So let's take it from here. Like I just said, I feel the correct decision was made to say no cars were able to unlap themselves, because that was what the first decision was. Safety car out, nobody's allowed to unlap themselves. And the other option, in my opinion, there were actually 2 other options. The thing is, obviously, the first of the 2 options were not capable of happening, because the cars that are allowed to unlap themselves are only allowed to unlap themselves when the debris and the car that has been involved in the accident has been cleared. The car or cars, depending on situation, but in this case it was one car, so we're focusing on this situation. So those cars are only allowed to unlap themselves when the debris and the stricken car has been cleared. And the thing is, because Abu Dhabi is basically a street circuit, Latifi's car was literally on the racing line, and when the cars unlap themselves, they need to go close to full pace, because remember, they need to catch up to the back of the queue. They've only got a certain amount of time to catch up to the back of the pack, so they can't just keep on safety car pace, just cruise a little bit quicker and keep the safety car out for 10 laps. They need to catch the back end of the queue. So that is why that option was not available, because it took 3 to 4 laps to clear Latifi's stricken car and the debris that he threw all over the track. And the second option was to red flag the race. And let me tell you why. Because if the race was red flagged, Verstappen and Hamilton would have been on equal footing. And the reason the decision that was made at the end of the day, we all know what decision was made. The reason that decision was unfair. How was Hamilton supposed to defend from Verstappen on plus minus 40 lap old hards compared to brand new softs? I think the commentator said it was a set of scrub softs. So it was a set of softs that he used in qualifying. So those tires have got a maximum of about 3 to 4% of wear. Those tires are basically still brand new. How can you expect Hamilton to defend from that? It's not possible. It is literally not possible. You could have put Verstappen in literally any car except the Haas, the Williams, or the Alfa Romeo, and he would have been able to have beaten Hamilton, because that is how absolutely shot Hamilton's tires were. Now, let's talk about the decisions in order. So, first, on lap 56, lapped cars not allowed to overtake the safety car. Christian Horner, the team principal at Red Bull, starts to bitch and moan on the radio. Mid lap 57, only Norris, Alonso, Ocon, Leclerc and Vettel, the cars in between Hamilton and Verstappen, are allowed to unlap themselves. No other lapped cars were allowed. Fourth, as soon as they unlapped themselves, literally immediately as they unlapped themselves, the safety car got called in and Hamilton and Verstappen are next to each other. So I already talked about Hamilton's plus minus 40 lap all tires. Okay? So let's put it this way. Hamilton still fought his heart out. He's trying to win his 8th world title. Hamilton still fought his heart out, and he managed to get ahead of Verstappen, well, almost ahead of Verstappen on the second back straight. But let's run through this in chronological order, and let me tell you why I was livid after this. because the stewards decided who should be the world champion. It wasn't decided by racing talent or better strategy or a better team. It was decided by the stewards. They're supposed to enforce the rules, which they bent to put more action on track. This is not an entertainment sport. This is a proper sport. If you want to watch a sport that is scripted for entertainment, please go watch wrestling. WWE is one of the biggest companies in the world. Go watch that. F1 is not a scripted sport. It's the best drivers in the best mechanical feats of humankind battling it out to see who is the best. And it's not just a driver or just a team game. It's a driver and a team combination. And the stewards are there to enforce the rules, not to decide who wins the championship. Now, before I go on a rant about this, me and Craig did a big rant about this on the Saudi Arabian podcast. But first of all, I've lost all respect for Christian Horner, Helmut Marko. Christian Horner, like I said, is the team principal at Red Bull, and Helmut Marko is the old geezer there that is basically a bigger boss than Christian Horner. And they are worse than two primary school girls who have stubbed their toes. Anything that Mercedes have done this season, they have had an egg to lay about it. They could keep nothing to themselves, and even their car at some stages had bits on it that looked illegal, and as soon as Mercedes protested it, the bits were all of a sudden just changed. I've lost all respect for Christian Horner and Helmut Marko, because they can't keep their mouths off of their rivals. They focus more on screwing their rivals than focusing on their own teams. And if Christian Horner and Helmut Marko ever hear this podcast, well done, because that is my opinion about you until the day you guys decide to step out of F1. In any case, so mid-lap 57, the cars in between Hamilton and Verstappen, aka Norris, Alonso, Ocon, Leclerc and Vettel, are told to unlap themselves. Now, first of all, the rule states that when cars are allowed to unlap themselves, every car that is overlapped should be allowed to unlap themselves to give them a fair chance. So what about all the drivers that were behind Vettel that wasn't allowed to unlap themselves, or in this case behind Verstappen? What about them? They were cost points. Okay? First of all, first thing that is highly unfair. And the last thing, as soon as the five cars, once again, Norris, Alonso, Ocon, Leclerc and Vettel, are allowed to unlap themselves, literally as Vettel passed Hamilton, immediately the safety car got called in. Because they knew, once again, the rule is the safety car is only allowed to come into the pit lane as soon as those drivers catch the back end of the queue. Obviously, those drivers have a certain amount of time to catch the back end of the queue, but they've got that time to catch the queue, and it takes more than a lap. Until they catch the back of that queue, the safety car is not allowed to come in. As soon as Vettel overtook Hamilton, to make sure Verstappen was behind Hamilton, the safety car got called in. So even those drivers that got themselves unlapped weren't able to fight for bigger points because they were just like, oh, okay, we're going green, let's go. We are, in any case, stretched out away from each other. Everybody just cares about Hamilton and Verstappen. And more than that, Verstappen was on fresh softs. There was no way Hamilton could have defended. Even if that Mercedes had 50 horsepower more in the straight line, he wouldn't have been able to defend from Verstappen. Now, you guys have already heard my options for solutions. The race should have been red flagged. We should have had 3 laps, a 3-lap sprint on soft tires for all the drivers and see who came out the best. Verstappen won in that manner. Nobody had any reason to bitch and moan. But yet, every British fan, every Mercedes fan and every Hamilton fan felt like there was a vendetta against Hamilton. And I don't blame Hamilton for taking 2 months of complete silence and completely going off social media, going off the grid. Guys, we've known ever since, if you're an OG F1 fan like myself, everybody knows ever since Hamilton started in Formula 1 in 2007, Hamilton carries his heart on his shoulder. And for me, being someone that does that, because I'm also very in touch with my emotions, if you don't have trust in the sport that you fell in love with, the sport that you're passionate in life, why would you want to come back? And we know Hamilton is driving for the 2022 season, and I'm so grateful that he is. But I would not have blamed Hamilton if he decided not to come back to Formula 1 and just retire. Because put yourself in his shoes. Imagine yourself, you have finally achieved your dream job, or whatever your dream may be. You are at the peak of your performance. You are on the top of the mountain. And just because it's just because of a stupid reason, you can think of any reason, but put yourself in this type of situation. Just because of a stupid reason to change how things are, you are knocked off of the mountain by the rules that you trusted to be enforced. The rules that you trusted to be enforced correctly. Nobody, absolutely nobody, can blame Lewis Hamilton for what he did after Abu Dhabi. Nobody can. I would have done the same. I probably wouldn't even have come back. But he's such a good person that he still believes in this sport. He still believes in Mercedes. He still believes in himself. And Hamilton, hear my words, is going to be a force to be reckoned with in the 2022 Formula 1 season. Because he got screwed out of a world championship, an 8th world championship. And literally I want to refer this to a WWE situation, and I'm not going to explain the situation, but just go search it up on YouTube. The Montreal screw job between Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and Vincent Kennedy McMahon. The 2021 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix was exactly this. It was a screw job. Verstappen got the rewards like Shawn Michaels did in the Montreal screw job, and just like Bret Hart, Hamilton was the one who got screwed. It's not fair. And I can say it now because it's finally happened. Thank the Lord, Michael Massey has been removed as race director, because he was the problem from the start. Goodbye, Michael. Not that Verstappen deserved the championship less. If you look at throughout the season results, Verstappen had the most race wins, the most podiums, and the most laps led. But Hamilton came back fighting. And if anybody says to me, Hamilton did not deserve the title as much as Verstappen, you're not a proper fan of Formula 1, because you don't understand the sport then. Hamilton was just as deserving of this title as than Verstappen. And if you look at Saudi Arabia, at Brazil, Saudi Arabia, and Abu Dhabi, Hamilton was the deserving champion, not Verstappen. And I'm going to be hated on this. I'm going to be hated on for mentioning this. But you can't go against the facts. And go watch any other podcast on the internet of Brazil, Saudi Arabia, and Abu Dhabi, sorry, and you're going to hear the same response. If you are one of those toxic Verstappen fans, grow up and start thinking realistic about what this sport is. It's not entertainment. It's a bonus that we are entertained by this, but it's not a scripted sport. It's not meant for entertainment. It's meant, just like the Olympics, to give us the best drivers, the best racing teams, and to see them battle it out on the best tracks in the world. Now, I'm done. Okay. Now, AlphaTauri had a phenomenal performance. Obviously, you guys saw when we read the race results. Yuki Tsunoda P4, Pierre Gasly P5, Well done, AlphaTauri. A little bit too little, too late with their fight with Alpine for P5 in the constructors. But I think Tsunoda and Gasly will be riding the momentum of that final race heading into 2022. And if they've got a strong package like they did in 2021, you never know. We might see AlphaTauri a little bit more to the front. But well done to Gasly and Tsunoda. And the final two topics. Very disappointing performance from Leclerc. Guys, obviously I talked about that hilarious yeet from Leclerc off the track. After that, Leclerc just didn't shape. He was constantly off the pace of Sainz and off the pace of the cars around him. And he was lucky to finish P10 and get a point. I think the safety car saved him. But it was just an overall disappointing weekend from Leclerc. But on the other side of the Ferrari garage, congratulations, Carlos Sainz. Vamos! It is a smooth operation for achieving P5 in the Drivers' Championship. Carlos Sainz has been the driver of the season, in my opinion. What an absolute animal of a driver. Can't wait to see what Sainz and Leclerc get done together and in that car. Well, in the 2022 Ferrari. Because that is, without a shadow of a doubt, in my opinion, the strongest pairing on the current Formula 1 grid. Sainz is underrated, Leclerc is massively talented, and they've both proven that they can be future world champions. So guys, with the talking points done, let's head straight into the final driver ratings for the 2021 Formula 1 season. Now obviously, like you guys know, Mazepin didn't start the race, so he unfortunately gets a 0 out of 10 because he didn't, he was basically not there for the race on Sunday. And Schumacher, with a good final race for his first season, ending up in P14, gets a 5 out of 10. Heading towards the two Alfa Romeos, Giovinazzi gets a 3 out of 10. Obviously both Alfa Romeos didn't finish the race, but for Gio and Raikkonen both having their last Formula 1 races, it was sad to see both of them retire. But Gio gets a 3 out of 10 and Raikkonen gets a 1 out of 10. Heading towards the two Williams cars, Latifi and Russell also both didn't have a very good final outing, but obviously we know Russell is heading to greener pastures. He's replacing Valtteri Bottas next season, and it's a new fresh start for Latifi alongside Albon next season. But Latifi gets a 4 out of 10 and George Russell gets a 3 out of 10. Now heading towards the two Aston Martins, Lance Stroll, also not a good race. Did Stroll even finish? Let me just quickly double check. I don't think Stroll even finished the race. No, he did. Him and Vettel both finished, but outside the points. So Lance, now I lost my place. There we go. Stroll gets a 4 out of 10 and Vettel gets a 6 out of 10. Vettel just being outside the points, but obviously being screwed by the safety car at the end of it. Then you've got Yuki Tsunoda with a very good 11 out of 10 for P4 in his AlphaTauri. Best result of the season, and I think Yuki is going to be riding the momentum into 2022. And then you've got Pierre Gasly in P5 with a 10 out of 10. Brilliant weekend from AlphaTauri. We head now towards the two Alpines. Ocon gets a 7 out of 10 and Alonso an 8 out of 10. Also two drivers that got screwed by the safety car at the end. They're heading towards the two Scarlet Red Ferraris. Carlos Sainz with his P3, his third podium of the season, he gets an 11 out of 10, and Charles Leclerc gets a 5 out of 10 for a little bit of a lackluster performance. Towards the two McLarens, Ricciardo ends the season like most of his season went, not the best season for the Australian. He gets a 4 out of 10, and Lando Norris for his final race this season gets a 7 out of 10. Heading towards the two Mercedes, Valtteri Bottas gets a 5 out of 10 for obviously his final race at Mercedes, didn't go his way. And Lewis Hamilton driving an absolute dominant Grand Prix until he got screwed in the end. Hamilton, just like Tsunoda, gets an 11 out of 10. Sergio Perez. Guys, I wanted to give Perez more, but obviously Sergio also retired at the end due to some sort of mechanical issue. But for his defending on Hamilton and a reasonable qualifying, I'm going to give Checo a 6 out of 10. Well, we gave Checo a 6 out of 10. And finally, your new world champion, Max Verstappen, gets an 8 out of 10. Now, the team's ratings The standings after round 21, the previous Grand Prix in Saudi Arabia, was Haas in 10th on 134 points, Williams in P9 on 210, Alfa Romeo in 8th on 220, Alpha Tauri in 7th on 238, Aston Martin in 6th on 246, Alpine in P5 on 270, Mercedes in P4 on 285, McLaren in P3 on 288, Red Bull in P2 on 324, and Ferrari was in the lead by only one singular point on 325. And now, after the final results have been calculated, let's find out who is the team of the season. In 10th place, we've got Haas on 139 points for their final standing. 9th is Williams on 217, only losing out by 7 points to 8th place with Alfa Romeo in 8th on 224. Aston Martin are in a very close P7 just behind Alpha Tauri. They end on 256 points, only 3 points behind the baby Red Bull team on 259 in 6th. Alpine got P5 on 285 points, with McLaren in P4 on 299 points. Third in our Self-Little Teams Championship, you can call this the Constructors Championship for Team of the Season. First on the podium is Mercedes in third on 301 points, only edging out McLaren by 2 points. In second place, you've got Red Bull on 338 points, and definitely the most deserving team for Team of the Season, that have performed the best, that have improved the most from their previous season, is Scuderia Ferrari, and they are the team of the season for the 2021 Formula 1 season, voted by the Motorsport Lounge, and they end on 341 points, beating Red Bull by only 3 measly points. Scuderia Ferrari, SF Ferrari, the Tifosi, we done it. Now let's see if we can do it again in the 2022 season, but hopefully we've got a Constructors or a Drivers' World Championship to go with that. Now, let's head towards the driver of the season. And the previous time we did the overall standings was after round 17. So the standings after round 17 were Mazepin in 20th on 37 points, Schumacher in 19th on 74, only 1 point behind Latifi in 18th on 75. Tied for 16th was Raikkonen and Tsunoda on 83. Giovinazzi was in 15th on 91. Ocon in 14th on 95, Stroll in 13th on 96, Bottas in 12th on 99, Vettel and Russell were tied for 10th on 100 points, with Ricciardo in 9th on 106, Gasly in 8th on 108, Alonso in 7th on 111, Hamilton in 6th on 114, Perez in 5th on 115, Sainz in 4th on 130, Leclerc in 3rd on 131, Norris in P2 on 134, and Max Verstappen was in a dominant lead on 149. Now, standings after the final round in Abu Dhabi for driver of the season according to the points system. Mazepin was 20th with 49 out of a total of 242. Schumacher 19th with 90 out of 242. Latifi 18th with a total of 98 out of 242. Tsunoda 17th on 107 out of 242. Raikkonen in 16th, also on 107 out of 242, but I feel Kimi had overall a better season than Tsunoda, therefore being a position above. Giovinazzi was in 15th on 117 out of 242. Russell in 14th on 119 out of 242. Stroll in P13 on 123 out of 242, Ricciardo in P12 on 132 out of 242, and in 11th place before we break into the top 10 was Sebastian Vettel on 133 out of 242. Breaking into your top 10 was Esteban Ocon on 134 out of 242. Bottas got himself all the way up into P9 with 136 out of 242. Fernando Alonso was in P8 on 149 out of 242. Pierre Gasly was 7th on 151 out of 242. Sergio Perez was 6th on 152 out of 252. Lewis Hamilton occupied P5 on 165 out of 242. Lando Norris was in P4 on 167 out of 242. Charles Leclerc is third, so he's the first on the podium with 169 out of 242. Carlos Sainz was in P2 on 172 out of 242, and your driver of the season, as well as your 2021 World Drivers' Champion, was Max Verstappen with a total of 187 out of 242. Now, guys, that is what the points say, and I'm not going to change anything about that. That is the official standings on the Motorsport Lounge group. But my final opinion on the top 10 drivers of the season, I would have put Mick Schumacher in 10th with a 7 out of 10. Guys, remember, Mick was literally in the slowest car on the grid that didn't get developed at all. So for Schumacher, pulling off some of the performances that he did was just exceptional, especially in his rookie season. And I feel Schumi overall deserves a 7 out of 10 in 10th place. Now, tied in 8th place on an 8 out of 10, I've put George Russell and Sergio Perez. Both drivers just having exceptional weekends or having bad weekends. There wasn't really an in-between for Russell and Perez. They both either had exceptional weekends or very lackluster weekends, but overall an 8 out of 10 I feel is a very proper ranking to give them. Tied in for 6th place, I put Fernando Alonso and Charles Leclerc. Now, obviously, Alonso is my hero, and for his first season back in Formula 1, after taking, it was 2019 and 2020, after taking 2 years away from the sport, and coming back, started the season slow until we got about until after Monaco, then Alonso really started to show his pace, and the Alonso that we all know and love. And Leclerc, to me, is the same as Russell and Perez. He either had phenomenal races or very bad races, but there was more consistency from Leclerc than from Russell or Perez, and therefore I feel Alonso and Leclerc deserve their 9 out of 10s. Now we've got a 3-way tie for P3 with 10 out of 10s between 3 drivers: Pierre Gasly for AlphaTauri, Max Verstappen for Red Bull, and Lewis Hamilton for Mercedes. Now, looking at Gasly, once again, just like in 2020, in 2021, Gasly was, without a shadow of a doubt, Mr. Consistency. Almost always in the points and almost always mixing it with the 2 McLarens and the 2 Ferraris who battled for 3rd in the Constructors. Gasly was an absolute animal this season. He achieved, was it 2 podiums if I'm not mistaken? He didn't get a win like he did back in 2020, but still, it was an unforgettable season from the Frenchman. And the day Gasly gets a car that can win races, he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. Now, coming towards Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, both Verstappen and Hamilton were equally as guilty in a lot of situations this year, and they both fought for the championship with everything they got. They poured their hearts and souls into this championship, and Verstappen came out at the end as the world championship, even though it wasn't, per my belief, by pure, full Verstappen. It was by an external source. But still, it can't be taken away from either Verstappen or Hamilton that they had an exceptional season with some mind-blowing performances, and that is why they are tied with Gasly for P3 with a 10 out of 10. And only 2 drivers I would give an 11 out of 10, and that would be the 2 best friends, Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz. Personally, I feel Carlos was the better driver over the season. Lando, the problem didn't lie much with Lando. The McLaren went from strength to defeat back to strength depending on track. And what I mean by that is, at some tracks the McLaren was almost at front running pace with Red Bull and Mercedes, and at other tracks it struggled to keep up with AlphaTauri, Alpine and Aston Martin. The McLaren just wasn't an overall good package this year for every track. But I mean, Lando nearly won a race this season if you look back at Russia. Ricciardo won in Italy. McLaren had the only 1-2 finish of the season at Monza, and that is with the Norris was second. Norris got a few podiums this season, and this season we could truly see, up against a teammate like Ricciardo, how absolutely blisteringly quick and talented Lando Norris is. So well done to Lando Norris. And guys, Carlos Sainz, what is there more to say? I've said it throughout the podcast, throughout this season. Of all the drivers who swapped cars, Sainz was the one that performed without a shadow of a doubt the best. He beat Leclerc in the same car. And yes, it only happened at the final race of the season, but still, Sainz was even more consistent than Leclerc, got more podiums than Leclerc, and nearly got more podiums than Perez. Perez had a few nice podiums at the end of the season, and if it wasn't for those, Sainz would have either equaled Perez on podiums, who's in a Red Bull, or even beaten him. Sainz had a phenomenal season, and I'm glad to have these two exceptional young men in my favorite team. I told you guys before, as soon as Alonso and Vettel leave the sport, Gasly and Sainz will be my two favorite drivers, and I will support them. And this season, I'm so glad that I chose Carlos Sainz along with Gasly, because he's a phenomenal driver. So for the final, I'm not going to read the points, guys, just going to read them in order. Even though a lot of them drawed on points, this is how I would have put them. 10th, Mick Schumacher. 9th, George Russell. 8th, Perez. 7th, Alonso. 6th, Leclerc. 5th, Gasly. 4th, Verstappen. 3rd, Hamilton. 2nd, Norris. 1st, Sainz. That is my final opinion on the top 10 drivers of the season. And guys, finally, our final Motorsport Lounge Predictions Championship round. Melanie said Verstappen wins the championship, which did happen. Safety car in the first 10 laps, which didn't happen. And a Ferrari top 6. Sainz got 3rd, 10 points for Melanie. I said Mercedes win the constructors, which happened. A Ferrari podium. I was very bold with that one, but Sainz delivered, and both cars from one team retire. Alfa Romeo, Raikkonen, and Giovinazzi. I get 16 points. Jadepie didn't send in any predictions, so she gets a 0. Jess said Verstappen wins the championship, which happened. Alpine P5 in the Constructors' Championship, which happened, and Raikkonen scores points in his last race, which unfortunately didn't happen, so Jess gets only 10. Janco, Demi, and Jonny didn't send in any predictions, so they all get 0. Boosted said Verstappen becomes world champion, which did happen. Norris beats Leclerc in the Drivers' Championship, which did happen, and Gasly finishes in the top 6. He got 5th, so Boosted gets 16 points. Now, in the standings, after round 22, and we will crown our first Motorsport Lounge Predictions champion. Demi and Jonny still tied in 8th on 91 points. Janco got P6 on 111. Boosted got 5th on 118. Jess was 4th on 126, with Jadepie 3rd on 139. I myself got 2nd place on 174, and winning by 10 points was Melanie on 184. Congratulations, Melanie, you are the first ever Motorsport Lounge Predictions champion. Very well done. And Melanie, I'll see you next season, because I want this title. You are the reigning champion like Verstappen. Let's see if you can keep it. And unfortunately, guys, I don't think Demi is part of the group anymore. I'm still going to have to talk to her, but her life has been absolutely hectic and in total chaos, guys. So please leave a like down below just to show you guys support towards Demi. But the rest of us, the other 7, sent in our predictions, and it's 5 predictions each. So Melanie said Ferrari to win the Constructors' Championship. 6 wet races in the 2022 season where 2 causes a crash. Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen will take out each other at least once. George Russell to win the World Drivers' Championship, so she thinks Russell will be the 2022 World Champion, and 3 cancelled races due to COVID. We've already lost Russia, but that's not due to COVID, so we'll have to see if that becomes true for Melanie. I said either Fernando Alonso, Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, or Lewis Hamilton will become world champion. Ferrari to win the Constructors' World Championship. You guys can see me and Melanie are clearly on the Ferrari hype train. Pierre Gasly to beat Verstappen and Perez in the Drivers' Championship. Bottas achieves a podium for Alfa Romeo, and Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton will crash at least one race in the 2022 season. Jadepie said George Russell outscores Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. Red Bull to win the Constructors' Championship. Pierre Gasly top 5 in the Drivers' Championship. George Russell achieves podium for Mercedes in the first 3 races, and Lando Norris wins his first Formula 1 Grand Prix. Jess said, 50 crashes in total during the season. McLaren to take the Constructors' Championship. Charles Leclerc becomes the World Drivers' Champion. Valtteri Bottas achieves a podium for Alfa Romeo, and Lando Norris finishes in the top 5 for the Drivers' Championship. Boosted said, Max Verstappen wins the Drivers' Championship, so he defends his title successfully. Charles Leclerc top 4 in the Drivers' Championship. George Russell wins at least 4 races. Pierre Gasly podium finish, and Ferrari top 3 in the Constructors' Championship. Janco said, Haas is once again a midfield car, so they are actually not a back marker anymore. Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen crash 5 times across the season. That is hopeful thinking. Fernando Alonso in the championship contention. So he thinks Alonso is going to fight for the championship with Alpine this season. Alfa Romeo is a front-running team. Geez, Janco, you are going bold, my friend. And his last prediction is that George Russell challenges Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. So basically what he meant by that is that Hamilton is not going to dominate Russell in the Mercedes. Good prediction. And finally, Jonny said, Haas gets at least double digits of points in one race. That is a very big possibility with these year's regulations. Williams top 3 in the Constructors' Championship. Holy crap, you're putting a lot of pressure on Latifi and Albon, Jonny. Valtteri Bottas gets a race win for Alfa Romeo. At least 5 wet races, and Max Verstappen outscores Lewis Hamilton in the Drivers' Championship. Guys, what insane predictions do we have here? This is absolutely insane. And guys, for this last part of the podcast, excuse me for not being as excited. My father is actually busy sleeping. It's like 10 minutes past 10 at night, and my dad has to work tomorrow. Has to be up early tomorrow for work. So yeah, just excuse me for not being so overly excited, but trust me, my mind is busy blowing at this stage, just so by the way. And guys, what a 2021 season we've had. My final thoughts before I greet you guys for the final time of 2021 podcasts. This has been the best season in more than 2 decades. And even though it ended with the stewards intervening, I wouldn't have changed this season for anything. Verstappen and Hamilton gave us a championship fight that we have been craving since 2016. We had a fight for the constructors for the first time since 2018. And we had the best midfield we've had ever, as well as some new race winners. You had Ocon winning his first race in Hungary, Alonso getting a podium in Qatar. Who was the other first-time race winner? Wasn't a first-time race winner, but Ricciardo won for McLaren in Italy. The only 1-2 for a team this entire season, and it was McLaren. You had that phenomenal podium in Monaco, Verstappen who won with Sainz in P2 and Norris P3. It gave me flashbacks to 2011 when Vettel drove for Red Bull, Alonso for Ferrari, and Button for McLaren, and it was the exact same podium just 10 years in the future. It's been the best season I've ever watched in my lifetime. And I'm proud to call myself a Formula One fanatic. I'm proud to call myself a Formula One fan. And 2022, even if it's not going to be as action-packed, it's still going to be a damn good season, and I can't wait for it. I'll see you guys for our preseason predictions video, and then for the first podcast of the 2022 season after Lights Out in Bahrain. Come on, Ferrari, let's go, boy. You guys have been amazing. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for staying till the end. Make sure to drop a like down below on the podcast if you enjoyed yourself throughout any stage of the podcast. If you haven't yet subscribed and you are new to the channel, make sure to hit the subscribe down below. Don't forget to ding that bell to never ever miss a future podcast or video or stream here on the channel. I trust you will be thoroughly entertained and you will enjoy the ride with us. I love you guys. You guys are phenomenal, and thank you for coming along the ride for the 2021 Formula One season. You guys are amazing. The podcasts are going to get better. The podcasts are going to get more crazy for 2022. I love you guys, and I'll see you guys next video. Cheers!